My name's Bridget Tharp. You will see me at the Short North location of Veritas, usually with 3 kids in tow, sometimes a couple extra, but I've been coming for a little over a year. I've been a foster parent and I'm a single parent doing this since last November. I was licensed during the pandemic and I got my first placement of kids in January. So we are on the path for the kids to reunify with mom and dad, and I'm really excited about that. It's going to happen before Christmas, so that seems like a really big gift for the family. So a little bit about them. My girls have been in foster care before, a couple years ago, and the family reunified and seemed to be doing really well. But dad had a business that failed about a year and a half ago. And from there, that, his business failing sort of sent the family into homelessness. And so there was a series of friends that they stayed with, shelters, and ultimately, mom and dad's relationship broke down sometime late last year before I got the girls. We started talking about Jesus and what it means to not be in control and to just sort of give your fears over. You can talk to Jesus about mom. You can talk to Jesus about dad. You can talk to Jesus about your siblings that aren't here with us right now. And that's been really powerful. For a 5-year-old who had never been exposed to church before, to be able to have that language to talk about trauma through, I think it's been really important for them. And it's certainly been meaningful for me to have a church community that understands where they're coming from. I know that, if they scream and cry when they go to the kids program, no one's going to kick them out. There's an understanding that these kids are a little bit different than your typical kids. So in January, I got the girls. Mom and dad were not together. We didn't hear from mom for the first month because she was, working on her mental health. Dad sort of got caught in bureaucracy. So here we are a year later looking at reunification. Being a foster parent has always been a life goal. I can't explain why. Maybe it was reading Anne of Avonlea when I was little or something. I don't know, but I just have always thought that was something that was part of my purpose in life, was to be a foster parent. Perfect timing worked out last year. The pandemic gave me the flexibility to work from home and be able to do some of the trainings to get this done, because it is pretty rigorous. There's a really good training program, but you have to be really committed to it. And so having a job at a nonprofit like I did at the time, I fundraise for nonprofits and there's a lot of evening events. So if I hadn't been able to do the training during the pandemic remotely, I might not have been able to do it as quickly as I did. But I became licensed to be a foster parent in November, and my own parents were pretty afraid because from the beginning I knew I was only going to do this for siblings. I'm one of 3 sisters. I think that's really shaped who I am. And foster kids get split up from their siblings in the system all the time. There's no shortage of homes who will take 1 kid, but there is a huge shortage of homes who will take 2, 3, 4, 5. So I knew that I was going to wait for a sibling group to say yes. So I got the call for these 3 girls in January 13th. I took them for the first time, and they were younger than the paperwork said, and that's okay. But I took in a 5, 4, and 3-year-old. And so they celebrated birthdays with me. The first few months they were with me, which was really cool. And they're just super wild. I mean, I am not a biological parent. This is my first experience with children in my house all the time. I've always had friends with kids. I love kids. I've babysat my whole life. But this experience has been like nothing I would have ever imagined. They're so cute and they're so fun, but they're so wild in ways that my toddler niece and nephew are not. I have had a lot of things broken the first few weeks, a lot of screaming. Something I wasn't really prepared for was driving with them was incredibly difficult because these kids came from, because these kids came from poverty. Not only had they experienced homelessness and hunger, but they hadn't had a lot of experience driving in a car. So mom and dad took the bus. So when they were in a car, like my car, they were experiencing being removed from their parents or being in the back of a police car to get to children's services. So the first time they were in my car, shoes were taken off and thrown at me. Books were thrown at me. juice in the car was sprayed all over. It was a while. I mean, probably a few months before I felt safe riding in the car with them. And you don't think about that as somebody who, came from, a middle-class family in the suburbs. The fact that these three girls have never ridden in a car and felt safe, it took a lot of work for them to feel safe. It took some counseling. It took a lot of practice. And now we're finally at a point where I can drive them to see my parents in Cleveland and I don't have a shoe thrown at me or a book thrown at me. There will always be those sibling fights in the back seat, but I think they're acclimated now that you can be in a car and something terrible and troubling is not going to be at the end of that car ride. I think what's extremely difficult about fostering and fostering as a single parent is that there will be friends that don't understand why you're doing this or what you're going through. And so I have been very fortunate that there have been other foster parents who recognize that I'm single and want to come over and help me. In February, there was a woman who I'd never met before who came to my house for 4 hours and sat with the girls so that I could go to Target and buy groceries, and get pajamas. And it's been really moving that people who are complete strangers but are just in the foster world and really get it will recognize a need and come after it. And I do wish, I wish that I had more friends who recognized that sort of need and would have proactively said, hey, how can I come over and help you? Do you need me to sit with the girls so you can take a shower by yourself without them trying to get in, or, fold laundry without them unfolding it all and throwing it all over the room? I had foster parents that did that for me. And so I think something that's a huge opportunity, Veritas as a community does embrace foster families, and there are some other ways that they can do that. I think one way is to recognize when you meet a foster parent, just ask if you can come over for a couple hours and help. 2 hours hands-free without a kid to unload your dishwasher or take a shower by yourself is incredibly helpful. And if you don't have kids, I think that's something that can be really intimidating. But at the end of the day, just letting a foster parent know that you're available to help and support in whatever way they need is really important. I also will say something that Veritas can do as a community is to encourage people who vocalize that they have a calling to be a foster parent. I heard from a lot of people in my circle when I said, I want to be a foster parent. Don't do it. You're crazy. You're single. You can't. You have a full-time job. Hearing those voices kept me from doing it for a while. And I do wish I had done it sooner, but wishing that I hadn't listened to the voices that told me not to foster, I would just like to share that if you hear that voice from somebody else, just encourage them. There's probably a reason that they feel called to do this, that they feel like this is their purpose. There could be a kid waiting in a residential facility that has no family that's waiting for this family to say yes to them. There were calls for kids that I couldn't say yes to because I am a single person. There were brothers who the older boy was in a wheelchair. I have stairs, and he was 10 years old, and I'm not a bodybuilder, but I recognized that would have been a limitation. I couldn't have carried this boy that was in a wheelchair up and down my stairs every day and kept him safe in my house. But a family that, has more capacity to do that is absolutely needed. Could I have raised a foster kid in my house with stairs who's in a wheelchair? Absolutely. Could I do it as a single foster parent? Probably not. There's another family out there that's better suited to say yes to that kid. I started coming to Veritas with a friend when I was going through the training. So I hadn't been to church in many, many years. I consider myself a seeker. I've explored many different denominations of Christianity. So I've always felt, close to God, and I'm certainly not an atheist, but I didn't really have a good framework of what faith should be and what community looked like. So I started coming here, and this is my neighborhood church. I live in Wineland Park, so a lot of my neighbors come here too. So I think that's really meaningful, but there's a different language that is spoken here at Veritas. When you have a trouble and you're describing it to a friend who has a faith background, hearing that they'll pray for you, they'll talk to God for you, that they'll be thinking about you, that's a different level of support than a work friend or a family member who doesn't have the faith that you have. I think knowing that somebody's positive intentions and prayer are coming your way is very powerful. That's really helped me on the foster journey. But bringing the kids to church for the first time, I feel has been a huge part of my impact as a foster parent. There's 3 girls, so they're 5, 4, and 3. The oldest one has experienced the most trauma. There's a close aunt who passed away, and she didn't have the language to talk about heaven, and she gained that. She gained that from coming to church. She can talk about Jesus. She can talk to Jesus. And on nights when it's really rough, we talk to Jesus about those people. We talk to Jesus about what we're afraid of. And I think that's been really meaningful for them. Knowing that God and Jesus is something that's going to be a constant in your life, is not an adult that's going to fail you, is not a sibling that you're going to be separated from, has been really, really important for these girls in their journey. And, you know, my refrigerator is now covered with pictures of Bible characters that they've colored at church. And it's really cool to know that they have sort of a channel to think about the sad stuff in their life and to have hope. I mean, a 5-year-old understands hope because she comes to church and she can talk about Jesus now. And she will ask me at bedtime, can we talk to Jesus? And we do. And it's really sweet to hear, you know, her own language and what she's worried about and what she's thinking about. And she can just kind of give that up. I mean, my faith has grown because of these girls and because of this family. This has been the biggest challenge of my whole life, is just sort of linking arms with these bio parents and working towards reunifying the kids with them. I have had to pray a lot. At the end of the day, they come from a place that's very different than where I come from. And the only way that I can relate to them is through prayer and through the acknowledgement that I am not always going to have all the answers. And that's okay. But if I keep showing up for this family, I think really good things are going to happen. I mean, they are now part of my family. I tell mom and dad all the time that they're like my weird cousins now. I'm not going away when the girls go home. I hope to still be a big part of their life. We've talked about once a month, the girls coming and spending the night for a weekend at my house just to give mom and dad a break. And I'll keep doing that. Something that's been really important to me in my faith journey too is keeping the siblings together as much as possible. There's 2 teenage siblings. They're in 2 different foster homes. And the oldest one struggles with her relationship with stepdad. And I know that for as long as they're in my care, I have the power to keep these siblings together. So I host sibling visits, and I take the girls and their brother to see big sister, who's about an hour away. And I feel really grateful that I have the capacity to do that. I mean, I have a vehicle that works, that's big enough for all the kids to fit in. I have enough money for gas. I have the time. And when the girls go home, I don't know that there will be as much quality time as a sibling group. And I think back a year ago at all the things that have changed in my life and the relationship that ended and the friends that I've lost. I still feel this incredible hope and that I'm finally on the right path. You know, I think God moved things out of my way. God moved things that weren't meant for me out of my way through this process. And something about going from having 0 children to having 3 wild little foster kids overnight is you have to be really choosy about how you spend your time. And I was a person who would network every night and do all kinds of events and stuff. I work for a nonprofit, so networking and meeting people is my greatest joy. But I found myself at home 5 nights a week with 3 little girls. And so filling that time and filling my mind with something completely different and just refocusing on my purpose and what my life goals are, and, just how Jesus has moved things in my world to be where I'm at. I'm really grateful that a year later, my life's completely different than it was.